I have to say, I was always kind of intrigued by Winter Burrow when I actually first saw it at the Xbox Game Showcase, I believe about a couple of years ago now. It was one that I've had on my radar since the developers have basically been working on this one for about 5 years, and I've always been drawn to this thanks to its sort of artistic design, and also the fact that it's also a survival game. I absolutely love survival games, and in that case I also wanted an indie that I could play on my Xbox Ally since I received that a couple of weeks ago now, and it was one game that really did just stand out to me time and time again. I was actually lucky enough though to be given a review key by the developers, so thanks to them so much for giving me one, and I've been playing this one now for around 10 hours or so I really wanted to give you some of my offshoot thoughts instead of doing a scripted video like usual, and I thought this sort of off-the-cuff review would be a lot better, especially kind of explaining this sort of little indie experience. I'd be keen to hear your feedback though in the comment section below, but with that, does Winter Burrow really hit the mark, or does it get buried underneath all the snow? Well, let's just dive into it and find out. So regarding the story, it actually centers around you basically going back to your childhood Burrow after your parents pass away. There's actually a really dark backstory here, which really delves into your childhood, how your parents have basically gone into slave labor and how they passed away, and you're basically left to fend for yourself with your auntie being close by. As time goes on through the story though, you realize your auntie gets injured, and it's your job to ultimately find her, help her, and basically rebuild her home. It's a fairly basic premise as a story, but it does get pretty intriguing and it does get pretty heartwarming as the game goes on, and I kind of expected that, especially as this is noted as a cozy game. Yeah, of course though, you will find other many NPCs along the way who you'll meet and greet, that being anything from a frog to a mole, and they all have pretty interesting personalities and stuff that you need to help them with. They all have their own backstories as well, and you actually find out all of them already know your auntie, so it kind of gives you a nice little backstory as well as time goes on. Of course though, all of those NPCs do need assistance, and that's where we kind of get into the sort of main gameplay loop of Winter Burrow. I will say though that the majority of the quests you will come across from these NPCs and what you'll be doing in your time within Winter Burrow is a lot of fetch quests. Yes, you can cue the groans because I did as well, and to be honest, it did make the game a little bit boring at times, but I kind of know the appeal, especially within the cozy crowd of these sorts of games. It reminded me a lot of the game called Cozy Grove. I don't know really if any of you know that game or have ever come across it, but essentially that one had you sort of doing exactly the same, sort of going on fetch quests, rebuilding an island, and making it homely for all those sort of ghosts of the, I believe it was a camp at the time. But with this one, it was actually quite interesting sort of going into Winter Burrow, simply because I was actually expecting sort of kind of a more hardcore survival experience with it, but instead you had more of a cozy sort of go fetch this quest where you would pick up some, you know, acorns for this mole, and that would be about it. It's very lackluster in the way that it stages the quest, and I kind of feel it's better in those sort of 30 to 1 hour bursts as per any cozy game out there. I'm sure it'll hit a specific audience in terms of like quest design, but for me, I was kind of expecting a bit more there. What I also want to cover now is just a bit more in terms of the survival elements, as I wanted to give you sort of an idea of how they come into play, as the devs have actually come out and stated this is a survival cozy game. Basically, the way that the elements come into play here is you have to craft more of your sort of different planks, woods, sort of rope, everything else in between to be able to explore further amongst this world. That also means you do have to complete the quest for each of the different animals you do come across, as they ultimately do give you better tools like better spades, better pickaxes, etc, etc. It's a good loop at times, and it can be fun venturing out and finding some new stuff, especially sort of hidden within the wilderness, but then again, it comes down to that same gameplay loop of sort of fetch quests, and again, it is pretty basic at time to time. I know the crafting elements also allow you to make stuff like campfires, better clothes, ensuring you have enough food as well, and that can actually be pretty great, especially with the different options you do get at your disposal. Obviously, making sure that you have enough food is absolutely imperative, and that's where the stuff like you have to keep an eye on your food, stamina, heat, and time of day to basically ensure you don't perish to the elements. If you do get too cold, you start taking damage. Same as well, if you don't have enough food, you go starving, you start taking health damage, and ultimately once that health bar depletes, you basically die. I have to say, I did not die once throughout the world. It was pretty easy to maintain it throughout the experience, and I guess that kind of goes into more of the cozy genre instead of the survival genre. In terms of the enemies that you come across in the world, there are a few that you will come across, and they're all centered around bugs like ants, spiders, and even I believe crickets. I'm not really too sure what they are, but then again, they aren't really that hard to kill, and the AI is just a bit lackluster, to be honest. Again, it's meant to be a cozy game, so I know difficulty really isn't a priority here, but when it's marketed as a survival game, you do want that sort of little bit of challenge. I did find that if you sort of run circles around the enemies and you sort of make a hit every 90 degrees, they wouldn't attack you at all, and it kind of defeated the entire point of combat, and I never felt like I was overmatched or had to run away from any enemies in particular. I do kind of wish they actually upped the sort of AI a little bit and did make them a little bit more difficult. I know, as I keep mentioning though, this is a cozy game through and through, so I know they wanted to make it sort of a more chilled and laid back experience, but then again, you do want the AI to be a little bit of a challenge at least, especially for a survival game at least. One thing I did find though, which was a cool concept, is that you always have to venture home to cook and build your stuff because ultimately you can't take your cooker with you. It's a really cool concept as it does make it sort of your home base throughout your experience, and then again you can build different items, design your home however you want, and it kind of becomes that central hub where you have to go back to at the end of every run. What I did find though is sometimes it can take forever for you to basically get back to this point, as there's no sort of fast traveling or anything like that. So if you do venture out for quite a while, you have to spend a while getting back as well, and it does get pretty tiresome at times, especially during the constant fetch quests. As for instance, the toad may want you to bake him a couple of pies, and in that instance you kind of have to go to the top right hand corner of the entire map or to the bottom left, and then you have to travel back to the middle, cook it all, and then go back to him again, and it just takes absolutely forever. And once you get back to him, then he'll send you on another fetch quest to the bottom corner of the map again. It's that sort of gameplay loop which kind of got a bit frustrating at times because it's just leading you here, there, and everywhere, and you're always going back to that central point, and it just becomes a bit tiresome. I feel like sometimes if they just let you craft items on the fly, it wouldn't be as boring, because ultimately when you're walking between each of the locations, there's nothing for you to really do. One annoying bit as well when it does come to the crafting feature was there's no sort of dismantle feature for items, which I feel like was a really big overlook from the developers. You can stock up and have to dump items within the chest that you have at home, and although the chest is practically unlimited with the amount of items you can get, they unfortunately won't disappear, and you can't just like say dismantle the old objects that you no longer need anymore to get materials. It's a very big oversight, especially for a survival game, as that's sort of a pivotal kind of moment. I've always had it in survival games like Rust. I know they're a bit more sort of hardcore step, but when you sort of dismantle your items like walls, floorboards, or even chests, you would still get say wood and metal back, and then you can rebuild other stuff. Unfortunately, it's not a thing that does appear within Burrow, and yeah, it just becomes a little bit frustrating at time to time. So in terms of the world though, I have to say they've absolutely nailed it here. It's so gorgeous, the art style is fantastic, and it just blew me away every single time. It kind of reminds me of TV shows from the 90s, like of course like Tom and Jerry and stuff, but it really reminded me of Watership Down. You have to say though, it's not as gruesome, but of course in terms of its visual presentation, it's rather similar in a way. It can be lovely though, especially when seeing the different scenery from the dark woods to the sort of warm windswept plains, and the art direction here just never feels stale at all, and I have to say is probably the biggest positive of the entire experience. Sometimes though, I will say the world can get a little bit complex for you to navigate as there's no map. I kind of wish they did add one, because it's a little bit confusing as to where you're going as there's no navigation tools at all, but then again it's not that big, so you can get around, you just have to do a little bit of experimentation. Also, you do feel at times that you can go through a specific path, but then you're finding out that the environment won't let you, and there's these sort of barriers there which don't look like they should be barriers, and it does become a bit frustrating, but unfortunately that is due down to the sort of design of this 2D visual style. Overall though, I really love the world here alongside the cute characters. It is a heavily cozy vibe, and it doesn't emanate from that at all, and I have to say the one big positive is the world in general. I know this is obviously a more of an offshoot review than usual, and I didn't want to sort of do a specific review guide where I follow a script, because I just wanted to give you my thoughts off the bat from just finishing the game. Personally, I really did enjoy my time with this one. I did get a little bored at times due to the quest design, and it was a bit frustrating running back and forth between your Burrow. I will say the world here though is just utterly gorgeous throughout, the characters are incredibly cute, and the story is pretty heartwarming from start to finish. I kind of call it a survival light game, because it's not that hard at all. The survival elements are pretty minimal, but it is there still, and it does keep you on your toes from time to time. For me personally, I would give it a sort of 6.5 out of 10 personally. It's not really my sort of game, and I do have to say I kind of went into it with an open mind to sort of get myself into the genre, and although I did enjoy it, there was just a few stumbling blocks which I personally didn't like as a survival game enjoyer. Again though, I would be curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think about this offshoot review as well, and if you like this sort of style, and obviously like the video if you did enjoy this review.